you all stand for the pledge? Thank you. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. As we approach our reorganization meeting tonight, Board of Education, July 2, 2013, here at Hubs, I will begin with our roll call of
Laura.
She'll be right back, but I'll move on. Thank you, Mrs. Laura Newman, who is our Assistant Superintendent for Business, Mr. James Tambolini, Board Trustee, Mr. Stephen Hartman, Board Trustee, Dr. Donald James, Superintendent of Schools, Ms. Mary Jo Masiello, myself, soon to be past President, Ms. Debbie Goober, Board Vice President, Mr. Peter Wunsch, Board Trustee, Mr. Gene Garnosky, our District Counsel, with Mara Harvey as his assistant in this endeavor, and Ms. Mary Jane Buddy, our District Clerk. We also have our administrators, Amy Ryan, hobbling around, but very much here, Assistant Superintendent for Pupil Personnel Services, Adele Pecora, Assistant Superintendent for Curriculum Instruction and Assessment, Reza Kolahifar, our new and very welcomed Executive Director of Personnel, our directors on the wall as they are every meeting, Mr. Pat Friel, Health, Physical Education and Recreation, Nina Bryant, Assistant Director for Special Education, Paul Infante, Fine and Applied Arts, Jonathan Macaluso, Guidance. Alice is not here, right? Okay. As we move forward, we will have other of our professionals involved at different points in time here, but we do still have Richie Schramm, our Plants Facilities Administrator, Wayne DeMarzo, our Custodial Supervisor, and Mike Inforner, our Administrative Assistant for Data, Curriculum, and Testing. I am not so sure I missed anyone. I'm sorry if I did, but now we will move forward with the call for the election of the president. No, we don't have to do a public. Okay, I'm sorry. That we will now have our president election with Miss Buddy handling that.
Thank you. Good evening, everybody. The first order of business tonight is the election of the president. And do I hear any nominations?
I nominate Peter Wunsch.
I second.
Any further nominations? Okay, hearing none. All in favor for Mr. Peter Wunsch as president? All opposed? No abstentions? Okay. Therefore, with the vote being 3-2, we have a new president, Mr. Peter Wunsch. At this time, I will administer the oath, Mr. President. I state your name.
Peter Wunsch.
solemnly swear
Do solemnly swear
that I will support the Constitution of the United States
that I will support the Constitution of the United States
and the Constitution of the State of New York,
and the Constitution of the State of New York,
and that I will faithfully discharge
and that I will faithfully discharge
the duties of President of the Board of Education
the duties of President of the Board of Education
according to the best of my ability.
according to the best of my ability. Okay, I'll call for nominations for Vice President.
I nominate Stephen Hartman.
A second? Any other nominations? All in favor? Aye. Unanimous. Congratulations.
I,
state your name,
Steve Hartman,
do solemnly swear
do solemnly swear
that I will support the Constitution of the United States
that I will support the Constitution of the United States
and the Constitution of the State of New York,
and the Constitution of the State of New York,
and that I will faithfully discharge
and I faithfully discharge
the duties of Vice President
the duties of Vice President
according to the best of my ability.
according to the best of my ability. Thank you very much.
We'll get your trolley.
Before I start, I just like to say a special thank you to Mary Jo. 13 years ago, I sat here and passed the gavel and/or baton onto her, and she has held this district instead and done a phenomenal job for the last 13 years. And I would like to thank you for that.
I want you to know it's nice and comfortable over here. I like it.
We get people to ask me questions. All right, we'll go down the appointments one by one. Can I get a motion to approve the appointment of the district clerk? Should we read, I think we should read the names so everybody knows who we are on this, or not? Or it's on the agenda. Okay, district clerk. Motion made by Mrs. Goober, seconded by Mrs. Masiello. Discussion?
I would like to make a statement with respect to several of the appointments that will be considered by the board tonight. Unfortunately, the first one is the district clerk, but this will hold true for every position that I vote in opposition to. I don't believe.
Turn on the mic, turn on the mic.
Anything you're saying, can you use the mics, please, because we want to hear what's going on? Thank you very much.
Thank you, thank you.
I'll try to remember how he phrased it the first time around. Is that better?
Yes, thank you.
Okay, I'd just like to make a statement that's going to carry over to some of the other appointments that the board is considering tonight. And I'll just keep it brief. Unfortunately, the district clerk is the first one up. There's nothing personal against her or anybody else on this list. But I will be opposing her appointment strictly on the basis of, in my view, it would be fiscally irresponsible for this board to appoint her at the salary that is currently being paid to her, in light of the fact that many other districts are paying much less money. And I think it's our duty and our fiduciary obligation to be as fiscally responsible as possible. And in light of the severe economic climate, and I would say that there is not much end in sight to that we have to be even more diligent now in our expenses and reconsider other cost-saving measures that need to be taken in fairness not only to the children, but also to the other employees of this district, who I think may look upon some of these salaries as being excessive. Thank you.
All in favor? Opposed? One. The next item on the list is District Treasurer Kerry Reinhardt. I'll make the motion, seconded by Mrs. Goober. Discussion? All in favor? Aye. Opposed?
Opposed?
3-2. Mrs. Buddy. Okay, all right, just, okay.
That's a 3-2.
Okay, good. For the chief fiscal officer to be the president of the board in absence of the president and in absence, the president of the board in absence of the president, the vice president. Can I get a motion?
Motion.
Motion made by Mr. Hartman, seconded by Mr. Tampolini. All in favor? Aye. Passed unanimously. School physician, Eugene Girardi. Can I get a motion?
Second.
Mrs. Masiello, seconded by Mr. Tampolini. All in favor? Aye. Passed unanimously. School attorney and chief legal officer, labor counsel, and this is required designation by, oh, I'm sorry, is it? Physician's assistant, thank you. Physician's assistant, William Sierra. Motion made by Mrs. Cooper, seconded by Mrs. Masiello. Discussion?
Yes.
All in favor?
I have a statement.
Oh, I'm sorry.
With respect to the school attorney,
No, that's the next one. We're on physicians. I know, because I messed that up.
In favor.
We're still on physician's assistant. All in favor? Aye. Passed unanimously. Okay. Now we get to school attorney and chief legal officer, labor counsel, which is Gene Barnowski. Motion made by Mrs. Masiello, seconded by Mrs. Cooper. Discussion.
With respect to the appointment of district council, it's my position that this relationship has been too long, and I fear that Mr. Badowski has lost his ability to give us independent legal advice, and therefore I have to oppose his appointment.
All in favor? Aye. Opposed?
Opposed.
4-1. Can I get a motion to approve the internal auditor, R.S. Abrams? Motion made by Mr. Hartman, seconded by Mrs. Goober. Discussion. I'm asking that we not appoint an internal audit firm at this time for many reasons. After reading the audit reports that were delivered last Monday, I have many reservations about the reports, what is supposed to be accomplished by the internal report procedure, and what useful information is being supplied to the board. Little history here. After the Roslyn scandal, New York State Controller Alan Hevesy, later convicted of corruption charges in connection with his illegal activities in his mishandling of the New York State Pension Fund, instituted mandatory fiscal training and the establishment of the internal audit procedures. Both are unfunded mandates on this district. As a BOCES board member, I attended the first of these mandatory trainings. At that time, they were being given by a business official from another district whose wife served as a board trustee in an adjoining district. Two of the school members from this adjoining district slept through the entire fiscal training. The reason I'm recommending not hiring any firm at this time, we're spending an exorbitant amount of money. We have $67,000 budgeted for them to tell me in that report that the cash receipts in the Northridge lunch program was short by 42 cents. We've already asked our independent external auditor to perform checks on those areas with risk and exposure. If New York State had looked at the reasons behind the fraud in Roslyn, they would have found that it was perpetuated because the audit firm improperly sold a bad software system to the district, a software system that was easily circumvented. This sale of the software was by itself a violation of AICPA guidelines and a conflict of interest. We have now had internal audits performed in this district for almost 10 years and have made minor modifications to our procedures based on recommendations from the internal auditors. Recommendations that were also made by the external auditors. We are required to have an internal audit. However, I am recommending that we change the criteria for the internal audit and only look at one area only and have that one be a high-risk area. We revised the policy and charter last month, and that will be something we approve in the minutes in a little while. But I feel that we should look into it in the next 2 months and come up with a fiscally prudent internal audit procedure. Our external auditor will continue to monitor other compliance areas and can flag us if it should be necessary to change the scope of the audit. All in favor of appointing an internal auditor? 2 ayes. Opposed? 3. We will look at this at a future meeting. Next, I'll make the motion to approve Cullen and Danowski as our auditors. Mrs. Masiello seconds. All in favor? Aye. Passed unanimously. Motion to approve Jenny Sylvester as purchasing agent, made by Mrs. Masiello, seconded by Mrs. Goober. Discussion.
I oppose that appointment for the same reasons mentioned previously.
All in favor? Aye. Opposed? 4-1. Deputy Purchasing Agents, Dr. James, Mrs. Newman, and Mrs. Reinhardt. I'll make the motion. Second, Mrs. Masiello. All in favor? Aye. Passed unanimously. Title IX Coordinator, Mrs. Ryan. Motion made by Mrs. Masiello, seconded by Mr. Hartman. All in favor? Aye. Passed unanimously. Section 501 Coordinator, Mrs. Ryan. Motion made by Mr. Tampolini, seconded by Mrs. Goober. Discussion. All in favor? Aye. Student resident, I'm going to combine a couple right here though. Student Residency Officer, Attendance Officer, Mrs. Newman. Asbestos Compliance Officer, Mr. Schramm. Designated Education Officer, Mrs. Newman. All in favor? We get a motion. Motion made by Mrs. Masiello, seconded by Mr. Tampolini. Passed unanimously. Payroll Certification Officer, Elaine McCauley. Motion made by Mrs. Cooper. I'll second it. Discussion. All in favor? Passed unanimously.
Can I just ask one question? I'm not sure.
I missed Mr. Schramm. You're right.
No, that you appointed the payroll certification officer. I think at the same time that you perhaps wanted to appoint her as the claims auditor as well. That's a little bit further up.
I missed the claims auditor? We missed it?
I believe so.
Okay.
The claims auditor.
I might have missed it. Okay, it's back up under school attorney. Okay, can I get a motion to approve
No, we didn't have.
Elaine McCauley's claims order? I'll make the motion, seconded by Mrs. Cooper. Discussion? All in favor? Aye. Okay. If nobody has any objections, we do the rest by consent? One vote. Make a motion to all the rest. Okay. That's set forth on the agenda. All in favor? Passed unanimously. And the legal designations of bank depositories, authorization to establish petty cash, official newspapers, insurance brokers, and board of registration. Motion made by Mrs. Masiello. I'll second it. Discussion. All in favor? Passed unanimously. Okay, the readoption of the 8 policies here. I'm not going to read them. Can I get a motion to re-adopt all those policies? Motion made by Mr. Tampolini, seconded by Mrs. Masiello. Discussion? All in favor? Passed unanimously. Can I get an adoption to fund the various reserves, workers' comp, employee benefits, and as written here? Motion made by Mr. Hartman, seconded by Mr. Tampolini. Discussion? All in favor? Passed unanimously. Can I get a motion to adjourn the reorganization meeting? Motion made by Mr. Tampolini, seconded by Mrs. Hoover. All in favor? Aye. Passed unanimously. Okay. I will skip the roll call since it was already done. And I will turn the microphone over to Dr. James for opening ceremonies. Well, there are none, so we're just going to administrative report. Right, okay. Yeah, I know. Excuse me. Can I get a motion to approve the minutes of the June 13th meeting? Motion made by Mrs. Masiello, seconded by Mrs. Cooper, and I have a comment on one item. Bear with me a second. Oh, no, I don't. All in favor?
I have a comment.
When the time comes.
Yeah.
Motion passed unanimously. Can I get a motion to approve personnel as attached with amendment for items 31 to 45 that should read Commack Middle School instead of Commack High School? Motion made by Mr. Hartman, seconded by Mrs. Masiello. Discussion? All in favor? I won't.
Usually before a minute.
I thought we did it. Okay, for 4 minutes? I'm
It's
sorry.
okay.
All right,
You're good.
all right. If anyone would like now to come to the
On the
microphone
agenda
on the agenda item.
You already approved them.
I'm sorry, well, I'm sorry.
All right. I'll take that opportunity.
Hello. Can I ask about some of the reorganization meeting items, or is that later?
I guess it's now. Go ahead, Jerry. Go ahead, Jerry.
So you
Okay.
definitely-
Yeah.
Hi, I'm Jared Behar. How are you?
Hi.
I have some questions about some of the votes that were made for the appointments for this year. Specifically, And I think that the district definitely needs to be fiscally responsible, and I agree that that's a lofty goal. But I'm curious, I guess, at some of the analysis for some of the votes for no. So I'd like to go through them, and then maybe you could explain, because I'd be curious. Let's start with the district clerk. I heard the general comment, but could you expound a little bit more on your rationale for the no vote on the district clerk position? I'm curious what kind of analysis was performed to determine that the salary wasn't in line and there was something that needed to be done there?
I'm happy to answer.
Mr. Tambolini can address that. I just worry that we're going to go back to dragging this district into the muck when we do those things. He had a personal opinion that there are 5 or 6 people who are paid too much money, and that's the man's opinion. By doing what you're recommending, we're going to be sitting here discussing every negative as opposed to every positive, but I'll leave that up to Mr. Tambolini.
Well, it will suffice to say that I did a little bit of investigation and inquiry to some surrounding districts as well as some in Nassau County to determine what they're paying these positions. And I think from any measure, we're on the top end. And I'll leave it at that.
Okay. I guess the problem that I have with a very general comment, and this is the board's prerogative and it can be done in any way, but making a very general statement like that, I think leaves the problem that there's a very general perception that there's a problem there, and without backing it up with specific facts, it's very problematic, and a lot of times perception governs over reality, and anyone can make a statement like that, and without hearing numbers and facts, and I know in the past when we've talked about specific personnel in the district, numbers have been used and there have been comparisons, and I just think it would be helpful if we're going to make a statement like that at a public meeting that's being recorded and is going to be posted to YouTube, that in fairness to the people whose jobs and positions are being discussed, real people, not just numbers, that facts are given to support statements that are made. And I'm not, in the interest of allowing this meeting to go forward, I won't go through everything, and that's fine, and like I said, that's the board's prerogative. But I would ask that if statements that are going to be made, that information be provided. It doesn't have to be now. It could be some of the time. Maybe you could post it to the website, or you could, write a blog on the patch or something. I don't know, giving some information. But I think that, again, it's somebody's job, and to just throw out a very general statement that could alter the perception of someone that is working very hard for the district, or multiple people, I think actually is fairly responsible. So I'm going to leave it at that. Thank you.
I thank you very much for coming to the microphone, as we would want it to be understood that each of the board members are certainly entitled to their vote, and along with that, their opinion. But it should not be perceived that there was any kind of study, any kind of investigation, and any kind of clarification as to how high, low, or in between these salaries are. And it's, as I said, each board member has that right, but clearly this is not based on an in-depth, board-focused kind of investigation, and that most likely will be on its way, won't it? Thank you.
Well, if I can respond, I'll just say this. I don't take lightly having to make statements like that, and I don't take lightly having to even address having to cut anybody's salary. But these are tough times, and we need to be creative. We need to be more fiscally responsible, and we just can't cherry pick to cut certain employees while leaving others unscathed. And if anybody wants to conduct their own investigation, it's all a matter of public record. I did this, like Ms. Masiello said, this was not a board endeavor, this is my own fact-gathering mission to try to figure out where we are in the perspective of paying these people as opposed to other districts. And in my view, the results speak for themselves, and I don't have the numbers here, but I'm more than happy to provide them to anybody who asks. My email is on the website, and you can email me and I'll give you those numbers, and I'll show you what I found. Thank you.
Mr. Fusco.
Good evening. First, I want to congratulate you for being president. Thank you. Congratulate Steve for being vice president, and welcome Jim to the new position. I had a question for
Nice to see you, Dan.
and you guys too. Welcome back. I had a question regarding the minutes for last meeting. Again, we had 30, 35 kids come up to the mic and beg for programs. And when I went back and I reviewed the videotapes, I couldn't quite understand what the issue was. The kids said that there were more kids that wanted to take art than there were teachers, and some of the kids weren't afforded the opportunity to take art classes, and it seemed from the discussion that we're cutting more art classes. So I don't expect Jim or Steve to know the answer, but maybe the three of you know the answer to what exactly transpired.
First of all, that's not in the minutes, I don't believe. I mean, it was just that there was a discussion about it.
Yeah.
All right, okay.
So, if I understood the concern of the students, we tried to clarify at the meeting, is that we didn't cut the art staff at the high school. And in fact, because of declining enrollment, the number of art teachers necessary in the elementary school declined. Because it's a K-12 position, meaning art teachers, that perhaps their position was eliminated at the elementary school because of declining enrollment, have a right to a position in another school due to seniority. So in the high school, all the two particular teachers were excess. Those positions in the high school were filled by different teachers in the school district who had seniority. The other thing that we do is we monitor the number of students who sign up for art classes, and if there's enough students to open a section, there are allowances to open those sections. So although the specific skill set of individual teachers who may have been excess are lost, there is no doubt about that, the actual number of positions in the high school were not reduced. So, and if indeed students sign up for those art classes and there are enough to open sections, the administration has not only the right but the authority, based on what was passed in the budget, to add additional sections because of student enrollment.
So what you're saying is, if anybody wants to take art at the high school, that they'll be able to fit into a class, that the cuts aren't going to affect the program.
Well, yes and no. And by that what I mean is, if a particular teacher is gone and that class can no longer be offered because she had a specific skill set, if we don't have somebody with that skill set, then we can't run the course. If 5 or 6 or 7 students want a particular section of art, we can't run it with only 5 or 6 or 7. We have a minimum number required. So I'll make up a number, let's say it's 20. And if we don't have 20, then we might not open that section. If we only have 9, we won't open that section. It's considered an under-enrolled class. That would be true for any subject, unless it's a subject they need to graduate.
That's understandable, but the perception I got from their pleading was that there were more kids that wanted to take art than there were classes available.
No, Dan, the issue I think for them was tied specifically to teachers.
Okay, well that was the second part of my question. Was it a specific teacher they were trying to save, or was it a program that these kids want to get into? And
it was teachers, unfortunately, that we had to go pretty deep into seniority. They were pretty senior themselves, but they were the least senior.
All right, I just wanted to make sure it's not the program and that kids that want to take art don't have to come up and beg to take art. Okay, very good. Thank you. That's
Hi. Very quick question. With regard to the bids, will you be announcing the actual winners of the bids?
Yes.
Okay, thank you.
My name is Cheryl Troy. Totally unrelated to meetings. What does tenure mean?
We're going to answer that, but I also want to make a statement. Going forward, we're going to make an exception this time, but going forward, we are not going to address non-agenda items at this time. But I'm going to make an exception this time.
Wait, we're going to answer it.
Okay.
It's a pretty detailed question in general, and I'll turn it over to Mr. Bernowski, who is our attorney, to give you some sense. And if it's not sufficient, what we'll certainly do is have somebody call you and get into a bit more detail.
Fair enough.
But it has a lot to do with after a certain period of time, whether you're a teacher or an administrator, quote-unquote, certified staff, you earn something called tenure. By law, it must be awarded. That gives you certain due process protections. I'm going to turn to Mr. Bernowski, who will give you probably maybe more detail than you want, but give it to you so that you understand. This is what I want.
To be clear, I am an attorney, so
Okay.
I understand some.
Okay, under the education law, with respect to teachers and administrators, the education law provides that, generally speaking, there's two exceptions to this, which I won't go into the asterisk. Teachers must serve a 3-year probationary term. During the course of that probationary term, they may be discharged, not for any reason, not an impermissible constitutional reason, but any reason based on the merits. Although APPR now puts a new layer on that as well, but that's generally they're probationary for 3 years. After they serve 3 years, the Board of Education, upon the recommendation of the superintendent of schools, can recommend them for tenure. If the superintendent so recommends, the majority of the board approves them for tenure, that means they cannot thereafter be discharged except for cause. And there's a statute called Section 3028 of the Education Law, which provides tenured teachers and administrators with considerable rights. It is not an easy task to terminate someone for cause under that statute. It's a very lengthy process. Similar provisions provide for civil servants after certain probationary periods as well, although the protections for civil servants are not nearly the same or as protective as those under Section 3028 of the Education Law. So basically, once a teacher or administrator is granted tenure, they can only be discharged after a full evidentiary trial before a hearing officer with for 4 or 5 grounds: incompetence, conduct unbecoming, lack of certification, insubordination, misconduct, etc. But that is a difficult, you probably have read in the papers, to terminate a tenured teacher or administrator is not an easy task.
This is state law that makes us have to tenure.
Correct. And once attained, it is a considerable right of those professionals.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Any other questions on the agenda?
Good evening. I know you're sick of me by now. My name is Donna Blanco. I'm the president of the Commack School Secretarial Association. First of all, congratulations and thank you to all the board members who've served all this time. We appreciate everything you did. I am speaking this evening on behalf of my unit, as there have been a number of abolished desks.
Donna, is this on an agenda item?
Yes.
Okay.
We have 2 more ladies being let go.
Okay.
There have been a number of abolished desks with 4 clericals let go despite a resignation of one of our members. 3 of the 4 clerical members who were let go were only hired in August of 2012. They worked the school year learning their positions, establishing relationships, and honing their tasks only to be let go in June. It is unacceptable that a school district, a blue ribbon school district who boasts excellence in education, would hire these clericals, which are desperately needed, without having factored in their salaries into the budget. Again, let me repeat that. These members were hired in August. They worked 1 school year, and not 1 board member or administrator factored their salaries into the budget. So basically, they were hired, taken from their jobs, removed from civil service lists, trained and worked hard, only to be rewarded by being fired at the end of the school year. This is extremely poor business management. It is fiscally irresponsible, and it is morally and ethically wrong. As taxpayers, we passed the budget. A very bright 4th grader at the June 13th meeting so eloquently reminded this board that you have the same amount of money that you asked for. We passed the budget. So why did the board choose to hire clericals with no intention of paying them? Was the administrator's salaries factored in? Were non-aligned and confidential salaries factored in? Why did you choose not to factor in the amount of money you needed to pay your employees that you obviously need since you just hired them? While I understand excessing due to enrollment, this really does not come into play with the clerical unit. We still have the same amount of buildings to run, the same amount, if not more, programs. This clerical unit has been decreased over and over. We had 7 retirements last year. The jobs that were filled, and that not all were all downgraded and salaries were dramatically decreased. This is a fact. We only have 1 full-time clerical in the transportation department. We have 1 clerical in the registration office. We only have 2 clericals running all of the buildings and grounds, facilities, and security department for this entire district. That includes our 8 main buildings, as well as all of our rentals and this administration building. This plan to abolish positions due to a lack of adding in these ladies approximately 30,000 some odd salaries each will affect every single school. It affects our high school and main school in their main offices and guidance offices. It affects our intermediate schools' main offices. It also will affect our youngest students at our primary school. All for a savings of approximately $90,000. Is all this chaos worth it? Our parents and students will return in September only to find every building has once again changed. This is not fair to our students. With a budget of $150 million, the best this board could do is cut the clerical unit. You cannot assume that you're going to have retirements to balance your budget. When you hire employees, you need to factor in their salaries. It's that simple. To hire them without any plans to pay for them is wrong. These devoted, hardworking professionals, and these are the ladies right here cut, they lost their medical insurance, they lost their family income, and now they are off the civil service list and unemployed. What is more disgraceful is we just had a resignation of a clerical. This $51,000 position should have saved at least one job. Instead, I got a call on June 26th, 2 days notice from the end of the school year, that 2 more clericals were called in, and 1 more lady was let go, and another clerical downgraded. One in the middle school and yet in the high school guidance office, eliminating 2 more desks. At this time, I am appealing to this board, along with our newest members, as well as our new personnel director. I am asking that you go back to the clerical budget line and you do the right thing. Fix this mistake. The domino effect that this has caused will be detrimental to this district. While we all understand that retirements can help boost a budget, it is unethical and age discriminatory to plan your budget that way. Please fix this terrible mistake. The clerical unit was just restructured in August of last year, not even a year ago. We did all this. Our clericals have stepped up to the plate and done their job. Now all we ask is that you review the inexplicable changes made so unnecessarily and reevaluate what has been done. Thank you.
I'm going to make a couple of statements regarding Mrs. Blanco's conversation. The first of which is the board and legal and I have discussed a number of times whether or not we would actually begin engaging in some form of sharing information about negotiations with our units. We have steered clear of that because it can be difficult when you begin those types of conversations publicly, putting both parties in a difficult position. Suffice it to say, there has been sufficient notice regarding our plans for restructuring that division in particular and other divisions throughout the budget development process. This wasn't news. Certainly civil service and seniority laws play a role in this. There's too much in what was stated here tonight for me to get into all the details and explain all of that, some of which is in our control and some of it isn't. No doubt the tax cap, the skyrocketing pension costs, and the skyrocketing health insurance costs has created situations for us that whether or not we should or shouldn't plan for them, make it very difficult to do. Make no mistake, we value